Welcome to Military Analytics. With the Ukraine-Russian war, Eastern Europe entered a brand new era, especially the Baltic Trio. Poland and Scandinavian countries started to take the harshest measures in their history against Russia. The war in Ukraine and Vladimir Putin's aggressive policies have heightened security concerns in the Baltics. While Poland aims to establish the largest army in Europe against Russia's aggressive policies, it is also preparing a military force of 300,000 people. The defenses of the Baltic Trio of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania are strengthened by the UK and the USA. On the other hand, with Finland's accession to NATO, the Russians had to share their border lines with a new NATO member. In addition, the presence of Finland's border neighbors Sweden and Norway is one of the deterrent factors for Russian aggression. Here especially, Sweden continues to take serious military measures against Russia in the Baltic Sea and in the North Sea. In this context, Sweden conducted its biggest military exercise since 1989, Aurora 23. On April 24th, approximately 26,000 soldiers took part in the exercise called Aurora 23, in which the USA, UK, Finland, Poland, Norway, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Ukraine, Denmark, Austria, Germany, and France participated. Soldiers participating in the exercise, which will be held in the air, on land, and at sea, were tasked to increase Sweden's military readiness capacity in the face of any attack or large-scale land, air, and sea maneuvers. While Sweden has taken steps to strengthen its military readiness capacity in recent years, in April 2022, it decided to increase its defense spending to 2% of gross domestic product due to the Ukraine war. Sweden had also deployed troops on the previously demilitarized Baltic Sea island of Gotland and decided to reintroduce conscription. Now Sweden has started to take much more serious steps in terms of navy, with the increase of Russian spy ships in the Baltic Seas against risky situations such as Russian espionage activities in the Baltic Seas. Sweden has recently taken a striking step in the midst of Russian espionage. Sweden has incorporated its new spy ship into its navy. The Swedish Defense Materiel Administration announced that it has received the new electronic intelligence ship HMS Artemis. The ship will now be equipped with advanced electronic intelligence systems and maritime intelligence sensors under the supervision of the National Defense Radio Communications Administration. Once the components are installed, HMS Artemis will enter combat deployment in 2024 and replace the Swedish Navy's aging HMS Orion. According to Saab, the 74.6 meters HMS Artemis has enhanced electromagnetic capability that minimizes the interference signals it emits. Company spokesman Mats Wixell said it was an important day in Saab history. In addition, Wixell stated that the delivery of HMS Artemis confirms that Sweden has regained its ability to design and build world-class ships and boats. The ship will play a critical role in the country's maritime surveillance and security operations. Given the emergence of complex maritime threats from Russia, Sweden's inclusion of HMS Artemis in its naval forces is considered the greatest proof that Russia is on high alert to prevent it from attacking its energy networks. Incorporation of this ship into the Royal Swedish Navy will undermine Russian leader Vladimir Putin's operations to provide espionage and illegal intelligence data in the Baltics and the North Sea. Headquartered in Karlskrona, the Royal Swedish Navy operates a submarine fleet of 5 diesel-electric submarines. This submarine fleet includes 3 Gotland-class and 2 Södermanland-class ships. Also, the Swedish Navy is the Navy operating the first diesel ships to use a Stirling engine-based air-independent propulsion system. Now that HMS Artemis joins the Royal Swedish Navy, Sweden's deterrent power and defensive capability in the Baltics will almost jump to a new level. This step of Sweden is actually considered as the security measures that should be in the Baltics. The reason for this is that, as we mentioned to you, the Russian Navy has exceeded its legal limits of activity. If you recall, the Danish Ministry of Defense confirmed that the Russian special ship, SS-750, carrying a mini-submarine for deep-sea operations was near the Nord Stream gas pipelines 4 days before the explosive sabotage in this area. The SS-750 is a ship designed for underwater operations and equipped with deep-sea equipment. It was photographed by a Danish patrol boat on September 22 last year. The photos were not made public as they were part of an ongoing reconnaissance mission. Jakub Karsaber, an expert of the European Analytical Center and a senior military intelligence, described the appearance of the SS-750 as interesting in the context of the investigation, since such a ship could carry out an operation. Tensions were heightened by Russia's fleet of ships disguised as fishing boats and the presence of a research group equipped with underwater surveillance equipment to map sabotage targets, according to a recent investigation. It has previously been reported that ships of the Russian Federation, both military and civilian, conducted espionage and reconnaissance work in the North and Baltic Seas and collected data on offshore wind farms, gas pipelines, electricity, and internet cables in the waters around Sweden. On the other hand, the knowledge that Russian ships are actively spying on Northern Europe causes serious tensions not only in Sweden, but also among other Baltic members. The espionage activities of the Russian Navy caused controversy among politicians from the autonomous region of Denmark, Copenhagen, and the Faroe Islands. A joint investigation by Denmark, Sweden, Norway, and Finland revealed that the Russian fishing vessels, Lyra and Esther, made more than 200 calls carrying electronic equipment to Faroe Islands ports. Some politicians from Copenhagen believe that the issue of allowing Russian ships to enter the ports of the Faroe Islands is already beyond the scope of trade and has become a national security issue that must be taken into account by national authorities. Considering that the Faroe Islands have a wide autonomy within Denmark and are not part of the European Union, it is a correct statement that the extent of this danger reaches global levels. So according to a joint investigation by Denmark, Sweden, Norway, and Finland, Russia is trying to use these areas for legitimate, non-operational espionage programs. Although Denmark has banned it, fishing vessels from the Russian Federation can enter the ports of the Faroe Islands. The Faroe Islands have joined EU sanctions against Russia for its war against Ukraine, but have left trade exceptions so far. Russia may also be trying to take advantage of these exceptional circumstances. It should be emphasized that Russian threats continue not only in the Baltic Seas, but also on land because Russia continues its espionage activities within the land borders of the Baltic countries. Most recently, Swedish Foreign Minister Tobias Billström announced the expulsion of 5 Russian diplomats. According to Tobias Billström, the activities of Russian diplomats are incompatible with the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations. The Swedish authorities then called the Russian ambassador and informed him that 5 employees of the Russian embassy had to leave the country. This security measure is a heavy step against Russia's diplomatic activities. Besides Sweden, Norway was another Baltic country that carried out striking actions against Russian spy activities. Norway announced that 15 intelligence officers working at the Russian embassy in Oslo will be deported. These Russian diplomats were allegedly engaged in activities in Norway incompatible with their diplomatic status. The Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs said in a statement that the Norwegian authorities' decision was a response to the security situation in Europe. Oslo points out that the threat from Russian intelligence to Norway has increased due to the deteriorating security situation. This latest deportation decision is based on the April 2022 decision to expel 3 Russian intelligence officers from Norway. There was also reaction from Russia to this decision of Norway. The Russian Foreign Ministry announced that 10 Norwegian diplomats will be expelled in response to Norway's expulsion of 15 Russian spies. As a result, while Russia's dangerous actions continue in the Baltics and near border lines, Baltic countries such as Sweden, Finland, Norway, and Denmark continued their joint precautionary activities against these threats. The hazy uncertainty that started months ago in the Black Sea still continues, but the powerful Western Harpoon anti-ship missiles have pushed this lazy environment far from the Ukrainian coast. The Russian Navy has blockaded the Ukrainian coast from long distances and is still blocking the movement of Ukrainian American ships in the region. Ukraine has requested long-range anti-ship missiles from its Western allies to expand its coastal defense, and Denmark has strengthened the coastal security of the Ukrainian armed forces by transferring Harpoon anti-ship missiles to Ukraine. Despite Ukraine's powerful anti-ship missiles, the Russian Navy underestimated them and still continued to pile up on the Snake Island. But this heedlessness cost dearly, just like the loss of the flagship Moskva, worth $750 million on April 14th. On the morning of June 17th, the Harpoon missiles in the hands of brave Ukrainian sailors carried out their first activity in the region with Bayraktar DB2 joined down. Operation Harpoon, sent from Denmark to Ukraine, succeeded in their first hand and destroyed a tugboat of the Russian Navy along with its heavy ammunition, weapons and air defense system and personnel. With the help of the Ukrainian Bayraktar DB2 target designation and marking, the Russian ship Vasily Bak, which sailed from the Crimea to the island of Snake, could not escape the wrath of the two Harpoon missiles. As an extra noteworthy point, we also saw that the Torm-2CM air defense systems on the Russian ships are incapable against Harpoon and Bayraktar DB2. In the footage released from Bayraktar DB2 unmanned aerial vehicles shooting in the region, it was shown that two Harpoon missiles were fired by Ukraine on the Russian tugboat, and this missile successfully hit the tugboat. Our Navy struck the Russian Black Sea Fleet sports ship Vasily Bak, equipped with the Thor air defense missile system this morning, said Maxim Marchenko, head of the Odessa Regional Military Administration. Ukrainian forces claim that Vasily Bak managed to kill 70% of the tugboat crew. The fate of the others are unknown. It is known that in this afternoon of June, 17 other Russian ships tried to conduct a search and rescue operation in the strike zone against the Vasily Bak tug. It was announced that the Vasily Bak tugboat sank immediately after the Western Harpoon missiles hit the tugboat, which was engulfed in flames after the attack started its journey to the depths of the Black Sea. The first kill of the Harpoon missiles is of great strategic importance and is a huge blow to the Russian Navy and its plans. It is stated that the Russian Project 22,870 rescue tank Vasily Bak was 20 miles east of Snake Island at the time of the attack. Looking closely at the video where the tank was hit, it is unlikely that Bayraktar was the source of the attack, as the missiles approach from a completely different vector than the recording drone. This was not the case in the previous attacks near Snake Island on 4 Raptor-class patrol boats and the Senator-class landing craft, which were clearly hit by smaller MAM laser-guided anti-tank missiles fired by a Bayraktar DB2. Instead, the destruction of the ship is much more likely to be Harpoon missiles fired from Ukraine's truck-mounted anti-ship missile batteries, which may have received targeting data from Bayraktar. Considering the data of this attack, the truth of the statement from Ukraine increases. Ukraine is currently receiving Harpoon missiles and launchers from the United States, Denmark, the Netherlands, and the United Kingdom. However, for now, only those sent from Denmark could reach Ukraine and prove themselves. Danish AGM-84L4 Harpoon missiles are known to have a range of 130 kilometers, are hardened by various electronic countermeasures, and combine both GPS and inertial guidance when approaching to the target. Russia had previously underestimated Ukraine's Neptune strike missiles and Bayraktar DB2 armed drones and tried to set up on Snake Island to invade Odessa. As a result, Russia lost 10 warships around the island of Snake, including the flagship Moskva. However, the Russian Navy underestimated the Harpoon missiles in Ukraine and still continued to ship to Snake Island. Essentially, Snake Island was 125 kilometers offshore and out of range of Ukrainian Neptune strike missiles with a range of 100 kilometers. But this was not the case with Harpoon missiles, because Harpoon can successfully hit between 120 to 150 kilometers. As a result, the Russian Navy is underestimating of Western Harpoon missiles has made Russia pay a heavy price. The last attack also showed us that Snake Island will be referred to only as a ship graveyard for the Russian Navy. The Russian Navy and even its entire army seems to be too self-confident, late learning, and full of strategic deficiencies, something that no one anticipated. However, the successful attacks of the Ukrainian army at the breaking point proved that the Russian army was much simpler than it seemed. The arrival of the Harpoon missiles in the region was seen as a great breaking moment. The Russia could not see it with this attack by Ukraine. The Russian Navy is now forced to deploy at least 130 kilometers away from the Ukrainian coast. The 1,200 tons Russian rescue tug is significantly larger than the port tug we see more often in ports. The tugboat was supposed to help salvage damaged ships at sea, but Ukraine claims that Bek is in a delivery full of ammunition, supplies, and missiles for delivery to Russia. Snake Island Garrison. Looking at the images and previously published reports, it is explained that the ship has the Torm 2 cm short-range air defense systems. At the turn of the 20th century, warships were actually very powerful weapons for hitting war equipment on the shore. In many wars, both the United States and Russia used such tactics and beat the ground troops with their warships. However, when we go back to the present, the level of development in land and to sea missiles has closed. This gap enabled land-based anti-ship missiles to highlight their advantages. Anti-ship missiles basically have two features that stands out against warships. The first is that a truck on land has a much greater stealth advantage than a ship at sea. And if it's hidden, it becomes impossible for the warship to find it. Second, the most importantly, losing an individual missile launching truck and missile launcher is a far more expendable consequences than losing the warship. Sinking or damaging a warship is one of the greatest tasks any launcher can do. Any army would prefer to lose their truck and sink the billion-dollar ship in this swap. To be fair, modern warships tend to be loaded with different types of advanced air defense missiles and electronic countermeasures to protect against missile attacks. However, anti-ship missiles produced in return for such defenses have found similar maneuverability and remedies against this defense. One of the main problems with land-based missiles is that they depend on an external spotter to detect distant ships and provide them with targeting data. The current equivalent of this is unmanned aerial aircraft. At the point where you eliminate the scouts of these missiles, you will greatly reduce the missile's firepower. In this latest incident, Ukraine likely made use of surveillance capabilities of the drone that recorded the attack, but may also have received targeting data from U.S. reconnaissance assets that Russia could not attack without reacting, according to some experts. But this possibly seems unlikely, because Bayraktar B-2 helped the Ukrainian missiles in target designation in many attacks in the region, and let these missiles to hit targets with this attack. Harpoon missiles came of age in the region and show how great a threat they are to the Russian Navy. The superior range and destructive power of the weapon also prevented the moves of the Russian Navy. Recent reports show that the Russian Navy has begun to receive a new naval order in the Black Sea. What this meant was that the Harpoon missiles pushed the Russian Navy considerably out of the Ukraine's Black Sea coast. Every loss in the Black Sea means a big wound for Russia because the Russian Navy cannot give any support to the Black Sea Fleet. With NATO member Turkey closing its straits to Russian warships, Russia lost the opportunity to pass from the Mediterranean to the Black Sea, and it does not seem possible for now to compensate for its losses. It is reported that the Russian Navy is engaged in a feverish work in the shipyards. However, the increasing shortage of spare parts due to the sanctions and the knowledge that these renovations will take many years may make Russia helpless in the Black Sea. Putin seems to have only one choice: completely abort the Odessa landing mission and keep Russian warships stationary and safe kilometers away from Ukraine. If Putin thinks that the war will definitely reach a conclusion, as he mentioned in his statements the other day, and if he dreams of realizing the critical Odessa landing, he will greatly be disappointed. There are a lot of updates from the Donetsk region. Here, Ukrainian forces learned from their mistakes and adapted to the new Russian approach. Shortly, Russian forces conducted a bigger attack in an attempt to develop their recent success. However, they entered a prepared kill zone which resulted in complete annihilation of their assault unit. Last time I told you that, you said the problems with logistics. Russian forces decreased the intensity of their attacks in the direction of Donetsk and switched their focus to Novelsk. I also told you that Russians applied a new tactic, where one assault unit was sacrificed to draw the attention of the main Ukrainian firepower, while another assault unit attacked the main target. The freshest report suggests that Russians tried to develop their success further and launched much bigger attacks. If previously Russians used 2 tanks, then for this attack, Russians allocated 1 tank and 3 armored fighting vehicles. Ukrainians identified that the main goal of this mission was to capture a trench network in the tree line in front of Novelsky and reserve their firepower. The moment the Russian columns started approaching the target, Ukrainian action crews immediately destroyed the Russian tank. Several seconds later, the first armored fighting vehicle was destroyed as well, and the column was stopped, immobilized. Russians tried to engage and suppress Ukrainian firing points. However, it was unsuccessful and Russians lost the third machine. The last remaining one decided to proceed with the storming, nonetheless managed to cut the distance with the trench and started storming it. Unfortunately for Russians, Ukrainian artillery responded very timely and destroyed the vehicle, while the fighters from the 56th Brigade dealt with the enemy infantry. The Romanian 4 soldiers tried to hide under the remnants of the vehicle but were finished by the drone operators. As a result, the whole reinforced assault unit was completely eliminated in the northern part of the region. Ukrainians conducted a successful counterattack. As you remember, previously, Russian forces reached the embankment and started rapidly expanded their control along the road. Russians established their main positions in the ruins of the bridge, established control over a trench network north of the bridge, and even started digging in and establishing firing points on the embankment itself. Ukrainian Marines from the 36th Brigade conducted a series of raids on Russian positions, sometimes with tanks, and managed to identify a weak spot. It turned out that Russians focused on fortifying the embankment but left the flanks vulnerable, assuming that an attack from the north is unlikely. Recent combat footage revealed that Ukrainians prevented Russians from conducting a rotation process with an artillery strike, making sure that the exhausted from the constant digging troops remained in their positions. Next, they caught Russians by surprise with a sudden attack from the north and cleared all positions north of the small hill, including the trench network, and highly likely even the bridge. By moving the contact line towards the natural obstacle, Ukrainians undermined Russian plans of using this bridgehead for an attack on Novokolinov. Avdiivka is the most challenging direction for Russians, and according to the former head of the DPR militia, the Russian rate of survival here is even lower than in Bakhmut. After significantly degrading their assault units, Russians were forced to modify their approach in order to continue moving forward. As expected, the new tactic became wiping out the areas of difficulty, in particular with Arab bombs. The spokesman for the Ukrainian Air Force reported that there are cases of the use of 1,500-kilogram bombs. Last year, Ukrainians managed to curtail Russian use of aviation by destroying Russian airfields, with the most notorious case being the destruction of around 20 fighter jets in Crimea by sabotage. This forced Russians to move their jets away from Ukraine. Ukrainian intelligence is working on new options and sometimes leaves Easter eggs in their interviews. In the meantime, as Russians started using aviation more frequently, the number of accidents involving malfunctions and pilot errors immediately skyrocketed. Recently, a Russian fighter-bomber accidentally dropped on Belgrade 2,500 bombs. The first bomb landed on the road and the explosion threw one car on the roof of a house and left casualties among civilians. The second bomb hit a residential building but failed to explode due to malfunction. Belgrade authorities evacuated 30,000 civilians from the city while sappers extracted and later detonated the bomb. Another accident happened in the Murmansk region. Here, a Russian fighter jet malfunctioned midair, and the pilots ejected themselves from the aircraft while the jet fell into the lake. Malfunctions and detonations are perfect concealments of sabotage. And even though these cases do not seem suspicious, any large-scale incidents may indicate the effective work of Ukrainian intelligence and spies.